Welcome back to Partnerships Unraveled, the podcast where we unravel the mysteries about partnerships and channel on a weekly basis. My name's Alex Whitford, and I'm the VP of Revenue at Channext, and I'm very excited this week to welcome our special guest, Tim Britt. Tim, how are you doing?
Hey, good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you on. I'd love it if you could give us a little bit of background about who you are, where you've been, and why we should be listening to you around all things channel.
Yeah, perfect. So, 20 years, I think, now in channels. I'm trying to count it up the other day, but started my career in IBM. Did a big stint at Polycom, where probably a lot of the listeners will know me from. I jumped over into a company called Cyberism, which was a cybersecurity company out of Israel. And then 6 years with Dropbox Business, building and developing their channel. And recently, actually very recently, in the last 2 weeks, I've just joined Freshworks as their senior director for partnership and alliances for Europe.
There's some really interesting brands in there. We're going to work our way through, I think, through most of them. So as you just touched on, you were the director of channel sales at Dropbox for EMEA. And I think one of the things that a lot of our listeners understand is that the cloud channel works extremely differently in certain ways than the hardware channel. I'd love it if you could sort of wax lyrical around what are the things you need to be careful of when you're building a cloud-orientated channel.
I think sometimes a cloud channel can be the hardest channel to build because you don't physically have too much something that's tangible. But I was talking to a team this week and I said the kind of number one rule, which I've done throughout my career in channel, is what I call the 90-day rule. So, and what I mean by that is if you recruit a partner, you have 90 days to make their first transaction. If you can do that in less, your propensity to sell is higher. But that also needs to be an evolving number. So if your partners aren't transacting in every 90 days, you're going to lose them because they don't physically own any stock. They're not building anything. It's a SaaS-based solution. So having that top of mind is really key when you start thinking around how are we going to put this channel together. And then there's a couple of leading indicators which I kind of think about. First is partner selection. And I've seen this work good and bad. Like you almost want to build a bit of a partner scoring system. So if you've got a hardware partner that all of a sudden says, hey, Tim, I want to start selling your cloud-based solution. And we're going to go and sell it in public sector that we've never sold in before. But we like the idea of selling SaaS, but their success is going to be very low. So you've always got to learn to say no as well as yes to every partner. And then think about what are they offering? What are the cloud offerings that they got? And we saw this a lot over the last few years where partners were trying to diversify away from Microsoft because it's a competitive market and typically can be margin low. So if a partner's looking at growth, SaaS is the easiest, or cloud-based technology is the easiest place to go. But from a vendor, what are the SaaS solutions that they're selling? How easy is it going to be to sell? So top of mind for me, that partner selection piece. And then the kind of training and enablement. We have to have a very good enablement story and journey. And the days of, here's the partner portal, go and click through it. Like, here's content that's out of date. It's out the window. I think what I always try and think around with training analysis is look at your own sales methodology. So whether you're MedPick, force management, salary, or whatever it might be, and understand how the partners sell as well, because you've got to get aligned on how you go to market and have the right sales process and understand the pain that you're trying to solve. And I think that's really key in that enablement piece, all of your words. And then probably just, to touch a little bit more on this, I think the co-marketing and co-selling is really interesting. Yeah. I hate it when people say to me, you don't give me leads. The leads are weak, the Glenn Kelly, Glenn Ross thing. But any partner that's coming into a relationship who's just expecting leads is probably not the way to go about this, because from a direct, especially if you've got a direct sales organization, why should a direct sales organization give up their own margin as a pass through to a partner that's adding zero value? So thinking of that partner selection piece again, what value are you bringing to this over and above just the transactional piece? There will be times when that transactional piece is needed, frameworks, procurement process, whatever it might be. But to make partnerships successful, you've got to understand how the direct sales organization is doing. So I'll pause there. It's a couple of examples and see.
Yeah, I want to touch on a couple of those points in more detail. Your sort of 90-day principle, I think that's excellent. A lot on the podcast, we've spoken around how you have to generate 3 opportunities within the first 90 days. Now, that's typically for a longer sales cycle product. As you say, if it's software and it's a high velocity deal, you actually want to transact those deals. But I've seen it time and time again, talking about keeping partners engaged. They follow the revenue, right? They follow where they think they can grow. And so if you're making that nice and easy by literally adding money into their bank balance because you're closing deals, or you're working with them on a co-marketing strategy that helps them create deals and keeps them enticed, almost your enablement strategy can almost be weaker. If your revenue strategy is brilliant because they've got shed loads of opportunities, people are hammering the phones trying to speak to them, then actually a partner portal, how much we're well invested in a partner portal sort of doesn't matter, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest challenge I always see in partnerships is the misalignment on profitability. So typically a partner is measured on profitability, a vendor is measured on AIR or pipeline gen. And it's this misalignment that if you don't get that right at the beginning, your partnership fails. So understanding what drives the partner salesperson versus your own salesperson versus the channel manager is key to understanding that.
And one of the things and I think this is true, whether it's hardware, software, or everything in between, you should be valuing that margin when we're talking about building a partner business plan around the full stack. So what are the services? What's the renewal? What's the attachment that they can play into that? Because you might actually have a very low margin. I know Microsoft's a great example. Lots of Microsoft products is incredibly low margin, but it's a facilitator. It's that 7-to-1 revenue, 7-to-1 ratio they always bang on about, right? Suddenly I can wrap everything around it and I'm making a fortune, even if the license margin is poor.
Yeah. And a really good example of this, I probably won't name the partner, but when in my Polycom days with a large SI, that ratio was 1 to $115. So for every dollar of Polycom, that partner generated $115 of services. And that is where you get that expansion and that C-level buying to say, actually, this is a profitable partnership for us. And that's how you start to see the growth with those larger partners.
What's so good is if you can build 1 to 125 ratio, you're doing something right. But what's so good about that is, to me, what I start to see when you start to see those impactful ratios bought in at a senior level, as you say, starts to drive deal velocity. Because now the name of the game is to get into as many customers as possible, because we can sweat that asset and really, really milk that customer to get that high ratio. And so it just becomes about an end user acquisition strategy. And then from a vendor's perspective, end user acquisition is the name of the game, right? That's really what scales the channel.
And I think this is what we saw. I think, as an example, at Dropbox, we moved a large portion of our direct business to the channel. So we actually looked at cost of sale for us, and we identified that channel had a higher renewal rate. We had a lower discount. We had a better customer satisfaction, better customer implementation. So as a business, we can start then monetizing and finding efficiencies within the channel by understanding how that channel is supporting us with those services. Because especially for expansion and for emerging markets, no vendor's going to put full-time headcount into that market. So you need to be a partner-first strategy, but you got to look at it from a financial standpoint on how this is driving that growth forward.
Now, to pivot slightly, one of the real challenges I see when people are building cloud-based channels is that there are actually 2 very different types of partner segments, right? One is a reseller, right? And we're selling licenses as part of an ecosystem of solutions that we sell. And then one of those is more of an MSP or an OEM partner, which is taking that software and white labeling it as part of an orchestrated package. Can you talk to me about some of the complexities about co-marketing, co-selling when you are in a suite of products and your brand's not even involved?
Good question. I think let's just take a view of that partner type, because you're right, between a VAR or a transactional partner versus an MSP, very, very different. And this is where vendors don't get it right. So why we want to go down the MSP route is, well, they're a services orientated approach. They tend to have longer term values. They have that customization and integration. So you build in value within that. And what's important to an MSP is the revenue per user and scaling and growing that. And then you then can start to align in that co-sell motion a little bit as well. And so I'm trying to round this out a little bit for you, is typically cloud-based solutions or SaaS solutions have generally sometimes a young in career sales force, right? Okay, so I'll be politically correct a little bit here, but generally you see that evolution from BDR to AE to AM and that career growth you did. The complexities of that is those salespeople only understand your solution and in that swim lane. And you've got to start thinking around, how does our technology integrate into the technology stack? That's where the MSP comes in and creates that connectivity and understands that integration or customization, versus a transactional or VAR is just looking to solve that one problem by sell your software. And that's the bit that you've got to try and understand and build together.
Yeah, and I think one of the key challenges that I see, right, we speak to sort of marketing leaders within the biggest channel organizations, and the real challenge from a marketing perspective is, how do you market with an MSP when it might be an entirely white labeled? If we take Dropbox as an example, you go, oh, we want to spend MDF to sell Dropbox, but it's not Dropbox, it's, widget X as part of an ecosystem. How have you seen that play well, play badly? Where do you see it? How do you see it progressing, let's say?
So a customer isn't buying Dropbox or Freshworks or whatever. They're buying the managed services, platinum, gold, silver, monthly active partner. Like, they're buying their solution. So having the ability to co-brand your collateral and layer the partner or the MSP to kind of top and tail it. So one thing that we kind of look to do, and I think really good success, is campaigns in a box. So we build a standard campaign that solves a problem, but it's small enough for them to integrate it into a wider solution. It's not the prominent thing, but it helps then the MSP then, okay, you take this solution, and this is the integrated approach. And then they're offering their service. And that's what the marketing people need to think about, is like, they're not just selling our solution. They've got to sell 6 or 7 other solutions with it to get that one deal. And that's the education piece that you need to do. Now, I think that is a better route to market in terms of quality of leads. And I've seen a higher close rate and propensity models on that approach, because the customer is buying a solution, they're not buying a product. And when you start looking at the lifetime value of that customer, when you get into years 3 and above, they're just buying. Someone joins, they add the gold package, they get these 7 applications, and it's all integrated. And then for us, it's really sticky, because to switch that solution out is very difficult, like, because they've got to change, the MSP's got to change that whole business model. So that rip and replace becomes very challenging. And I've seen really good success. Like a Dropbox, we had, I'll give a call out to a company called Abbey Comp in the UK. John's listening, but John was great at doing this, where he'd take, entry point to Microsoft, Dropbox for this collaboration, the Adobe, whatever it was, and create this gold layer. And they would focus then on verticals around media, and they had a very strong offering and go-to-market.
Yeah, we like to call it on this channel as the sort of Salesforce stickiness, right? Because once you're embedded, you've got your claws into that customer, the more you are ingrained, the more products that are associated, the more time that's associated with unpicking it. Just means you never churn, right? And so this is why we see companies like Salesforce, HubSpot have the highest LTV of basically anyone in the world, because the operational cost of turning that off is more than the contract, right? And so then you're just sorted forever. I think one of the friction points in terms of that marketing element when we talk about co-brandable assets is surely one of the challenges that you come across is you've then got to be speaking to partners who've got the marketing resource. They're going to dedicate the time to helping you market. Where do you see the friction points in actually getting MSPs to market?
I think you've got it. The training and support to drive that. So if an MSP is then, go with your product, and then the customer's like, hey, I really like this, but you've not enabled and trained, because typically an MSP is going to have consultants and they're going to have very strong technical skills and that consultative approach. The biggest fall is then, or the risk is when that partner consultant gets in a meeting and they're whiteboarding this whole solution and vision, and then it comes to Freshworks or Dropbox or whatever it's probably, and then they're like, oh, I don't know enough about this, but I know it's good and my boss has told me to stick it in. So you've got to get that layer of enablement right first to fill the confidence, because I mean, we've seen this with the competitive side over the years. Partners sell what they know, but they don't want to propose a solution that they're concerned, especially in cybersecurity was one of the biggest. This is such a, it's such a high risk product set. You are not going to sell a cybersecurity product that isn't going to stack up and help them. So, enablement for me is the key.
One of the ways we always coach brands here is to talk them through. There's two levers that you can pull. You can give a partner more margin, or you can make it easier to sell. The one that's harder to do is to give them more margin. The one that's actually more valuable is to make it easier to sell, right? And you do that by better sales enablement. You do that by improvement in marketing, whatever that process is. But the amount of SCs that me and you both know personally will walk into a room and go, I don't care. This thing has all the bells and whistles, but I'm not 100% comfortable. It's too hard for me to sell, so I'm selling the thing I know, right?
I mean, so the coaching I do with the team is there's two things on this. So first question I always ask whenever I meet a new partner is, the last time you onboarded a new technology, tell me what was great about their enablement. What worked for you, Mr. Partner? And then we want to replicate that. It's no good coming in with, hey, this is how we do it here, and it's great, but actually listen, ask those questions. And the other shortfall, which I see a lot, is we don't treat partner recruitment like a sales process, right? And this goes back to that 90-day rule we talked about. Partner signs up, signed the reseller agreement, and then 90 days later, they've not sold anything, because we've not treated it like, if you as a customer, you would do discovery, you would identify pain, you would do what's the critical event? Why is this partner going to sell my solution? What gap are we filling for their customer? And ultimately, the close is when they make their first transaction. But if you treat it like a sales process and really understand the pain and identify the impact that we've got, that's how you just get those past huge growing partnerships going.
Awesome. I think one of the things that I'm really sort of bullish about in terms of where channels are going to develop, we see that there's technology alliances, and software in particular is really big on alliances, right? How do we integrate our tool with these other tools? And that's sort of done at a senior, very technologically led level. And then somewhere down the waterfall, a channel gets involved, but they're not particularly, ironically, for it being called alliances, well aligned between those channels, right? It's just, we throw stuff off the top, and hopefully at some point down in the ecosystem, it will come together and a partner will sell a cohesive message. They'll market a cohesive strategy. Maybe a distributor will place some value there. What do you see in terms of blending channel alliances? Because I think the brands that do that well are going to be the ones that win.
Yeah, and there's our two views on this. So why does the vendor use an alliance? Well, sometimes it's referenceability. It's, hey, enough, we work with Microsoft and we can do this and do that. And then there's the people that do it extremely well. Like if you're blending that channel alliances together, you maximize your reach and your effectiveness of that partnership. So a couple of things to me is like that segmentation targeted. So identify which channel partners are more likely to sell your alliance offerings based on their expertise, customer base. Like, what's the connective layer here? And this is why I think you're seeing a huge drive in ISV programs at the moment. as well. So historically, it was always the big global brands. And if you kind of look at that cost versus the LTV on that whole partnership, it's quite low. Like some things just tick off. You get into the ISV world, and then you start then creating customization, flexibility, enablement support. And then what I always say is understand the partners that meet in the middle. So how does the partner take both technologies and then start to build and optimize a business around it? And then the one thing that people always forget is the partner plus vendor plus alliance. So prime example, like I'm a specialist in ITSM. I'm not going to go and sell Zulu, but my customer needs a communication tech stack that integrates with the workflow around my CX or whatever it might be. So actually start bringing the best of breed skills from partners together with this overarching layer of what we tag under the alliances. You get that right, I'd say you're a bit untouchable.
And we've spoken earlier on in this podcast around how marketing is critical in terms of opportunity creation, speed to market for your partners. And I love that sort of philosophy of let's start the stopwatch the day the partner signs, right?
Yeah.
And so we've got to get them to value. I think the real area where, to me, it's just such a black hole at the moment is, let's take, X brand announces marketing or sign off with Microsoft, right? There's an alliance from a marketing perspective. But it's never filtered down into demand gen done by partners, right? It's never actually creating opportunities. To me, that's the real sweet spot that I look at now to say, hang on a second, the brands that get that done right at the local level, from the partner's voice, they're the ones that are going to really spearhead those alliances actually, driving agility and creating revenue. Yeah. What's your sort of vision in terms of how marketing can drive alliances?
I think don't be selfish, right? You're going to go into this joint approach. Don't have your measurements on sales stage 3 pipeline creation, right? Because not all leads are going to go your way and it's very difficult to manage. Think about a more cohesive and strategic approach. So where you leverage both partnership models to expand the reach and drive that revenue growth is key, and understand what you're bringing to the table. So the referenceability, the customer use cases, how this things together, the value, like we forget about the value for the customer. I mean, and it goes back to that sales approach again. What pain points are we trying to solve? And I remember it was Polycarb or whenever, but I don't know if you remember the Better Together campaigns from years ago. I mean, are we better together? But what are we better at? So I think that was always what my question was. And then you just saw this huge growth with all of these huge tech vendors. Oh, I'm a gold alliance partner, I'm a platinum plus. And then when she lifts the hood, and this is where MSPs are really good, they look at that and say, well, what is it that is? Like you have no integration at all, really. You're just saying that you can do something. So, and that's why I like that ISV alliance layer down. So someone who's building a very specific solution around HR, an example from Dropbox days, like, you've got a HR solution that their back end isn't a data store. So how do they control from a legality and data protection piece? How do they control people's CV? So the cybersecurity piece, like if I got your CV, I can start to build this vision behind what you are, and then I can start to look at how we breach and things. So how would you protect CVs? Because when you apply for a job, you give everybody everything. Your scores, your dates, your address, your phone number, where you live, like everything about you. So you've got a HR solution, then all of a sudden actually putting something like Dropbox on the back of it, that's a very different sales play versus than we just have an integration with Dropbox. So have that.
And I think the really funny one is, right, so if you just think about it hypothetically, tech alliances come because one brand can't solve a particular problem. It comes up against a hurdle. And typically it comes up against a hurdle in a massive customer where that customer typically sold direct and that customer goes, no, this doesn't work, fix it. And so then they go, oh, God, we've got to go and fix that. So they go and build an alliance at a technical level. and then they don't market that use case through the market. It's absolutely bananas, right? Because what I'm thinking is, hey, our ecosystem ends here, this ecosystem starts here, we bring them together, and then I want my entire channel, and we know channels of hundreds of thousands of partners, but if I litmus test them on why did these two brands form a partnership, they have no idea. Right. And to me, it's how do we scale that message down wide? Because you're going to pick up so much stuff, because it's not just an HSBC who's encountered this problem, right? There's thousands, millions of end users all over the world that have.
Yeah, I think that goes back, like, it enhance that credibility, that complementary expertise, but it's the why and what are we actually providing here? And I've seen this, and I'm working in large tech companies, and we have the internal enablement call, and it's the drum beats, and it's like, hey, we've just got a partnership with this, and the channel is always the first ones to say is, okay, what is it? What are we actually positioning here? And then the alliance team was like, we got alliance. So I agree with it. And then the kind of, just to follow on that, the one thing that I always see is never happens well. You do all the, if you do this marketing campaign really well, and the alliance is really good, you never share success on each other's websites. So we never actually put a case study on where us and the alliance and the partner did. And that's very rare that you see that.
Yeah, I mean, this is why companies like Reveal and Crossbeam are doing so well to build those sort of end user account plans effectively, where we can do a white space analysis cross companies, because that's so important. It's like, hang on, we've sold to these 150, we've sold to these 100, there's a 75 crossover, cool, we know where the white space is, let's go after it together. The problem is that's really hard to do via the channel, right? And so instead, my philosophy is you need to let marketing do that by drip feeding the information, drip feeding the wins down, and letting the market come at an end user pull level and say, hey, we are also encountering that problem.
I would like to see some of the larger partners actually approach the vendors and say, we see value and we see opportunity here, and we actually think there's a really strong business case to do this. So how do we do it? You build the integration and we'll go and sell it. You never get that reverse approach. I think that is something, even if you offer exclusivity to that partner, is another good way to manage and do that. And they've got something very niche in the market that they can then develop and grow.
I think the exclusivity piece, because I could imagine I'm just hearing a load of partners that we know too well going, hang on a second, we're not doing all this work so that they can pump it out to my direct competitor. But I think if that exclusivity was available, we would see loads of deployments and innovative solutions. I think that's why MSPs and ISVs provide such huge value to the market.
Yeah, and we had this at Dropbox. So there was a partner in the US that built a Dynamics integration with Dropbox, and we weren't going to build it ourselves. We just, we couldn't cost effectively build it. So all of a sudden we gave that partner exclusivity, and then we resold that offering globally through that, and that's that partner plus partner. So all of a sudden they had an IP that actually was better than we could ever create. And every time we needed Dynamics integration, we just introduced that partner.
Awesome. Well, look, Tim, we are a channel and a partnerships podcast. And so as part of that, we're always looking for our guests to recommend the next great guest. Who did you have in mind that we should have onto the podcast?
So someone I've been following very closely, and I'm very interested to hear on this podcast, is a guy called David Kuhlstrom, who is at Notion, who has just taken the lead on their EMEA channels. And I think anyone who's watching this market at the moment, Notion is one of the fastest growing solutions. So I'd love to hear from David. I do know him personally as well. So I think he'll be a great guest for you on this podcast.
Awesome. David, we're coming for you. Tim, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Perfect. Thank you for having me.
Cheers, then. We'll see our listeners next week.